Hello, everyone. We're here to present on the NSF grant as well as implementing equity practices within it. And we have our PI Kieran here as well as three wonderful faculty participants, and we'll be introducing them later on. But first, we're going to talk about the NSF grant and what we're going to be doing. Let me go to the next slide. So the NSF grant that we work on is called Fostering an Equity-Minded Student Success Culture in STEM through Faculty Development. In case you want to know our award number, it's displayed right up there. But the goal of our grant is to focus on having our faculty within STEM, and this is going to be recently tenured or tenured process or in the tenured process faculty going through equity developments and faculty development programs specifically designed to help implement equity within the classroom. So rather than just focusing on practices, we're also focusing on what our faculty can develop themselves. So it's a 2.5 million grant with a 5-year cycle that ends on September 2024. As I said, it focused on STEM faculty development. And the goal is to have various cohorts. Our goal is to have 4 right now of equity coaches and STEM faculty that complete professional development and develop equity practices that lead to equitable student success, and that these practices get presented institutionally, regionally, and nationally.
So to give a little bit of a background on our grant, so it was really developed in response to our SRI STEM program, which is now in its 10th year. We saw a lot of key successes with that program, with things like STEM Skills Week, our counseling, peer mentorship, supplemental instruction. And at the same time, we recognized some gaps, including lower than expected graduation transfer GPAs, failure in math and other STEM classes. One of the key missing pieces in all of this was the faculty, because it's really the faculty who interface the most with our students. And there's a robust amount of data that looks at the impact that we as faculty have. And we recognize that there are various factors that affect student success, but faculty do play a large role. A large meta-analysis looking at over 50,000 research studies found teacher as opposed to student, home, school, curricula, teaching to be the #1 determinant of student success. And in one of our EGC sessions today, we had Dr. Frank Harris III, who has done research looking at factors that are predictive of student success, and he found that faculty ethos was the largest predictor of student success, more than students' socioeconomic background. Another study that I think is guiding here is Gafrida and Dutit, that looked at faculty-student relationships, which are predictive of student success, especially when it comes to our racially minoritized students. But those relationships are often lacking in the classroom.
So the goal of the grant is to recruit faculty who are in the tenure track or recently tenured within our STEM programs, and create an initial and an equity-focused practices in the classroom. So what you're going to see is that our faculty today have gone through a year-long of training with various types of equity pedagogy and professional development, and then that they have themselves identified equity practices that they would like to implement this fall. So after that, we would be moving on to our new cohort, which would be starting in the spring, and we would be continuing the process of recruiting faculty, identifying and implementing and investigating what kind of practices are really successful in the outcomes of our Black, Latinx, and other underrepresented students within the STEM courses. And really with the programs like NSF and like EGC, it's really to promote a sense of equity and culture that is really focused on today in our professional development and our whole Flex Day. And even though our focus is specifically STEM, I'm glad that we're playing into the broader picture. And now to present our NSF participants, we have Andria Denmon, Jing Liu, and Chris Grant. I'm going to pass it over to Andria first and let her introduce herself.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Andria Denmon, and I am in the Life Sciences Department. I will be starting my 3rd year here at SMC, and I'm really happy to be here with you to share a sample of what I'm doing in the upcoming semester, and as well as some of the practices that I've implemented in previous semesters. Next slide, please. One of the things that I found to be really helpful participating in this particular program is that many of us are coming from diverse disciplines, but also diverse lived experiences. And what that does is it brings about a unique collective in a way of thought. And it really highlighted, being part of this program, that equity is not a one size fits all, and that there's not one right way to do equity, that we all bring something to the table in order to progress forward. And you'll see that many of us have different experiences with our equity and inclusion journey or adventure. And you'll see that even though we were exposed to many of the same types of topics, conversations, that we all gleaned something slightly different in order to build interventions that we felt would be helpful to our students to prepare them for the disciplines that we are familiar with, but also reflect our own uniqueness and comfort level at doing and implementing these different interventions. So one of the things that I had kind of seen before in some of my equity and inclusion journey, I was able to bring to the table. And one of those things that kept coming up in mind as I listened to other people speak and some of the sessions that I attended was that we as professors really kind of toggle between multiple roles and hats that we wear. We are educators because our goal is to impart a certain amount of knowledge to our students and set these expectations, but we also have to be mentors because we have to encourage our students, let them know that they can do it and be that emotional support for them. But on top of that, we're also concerned with metrics as supervisors. And it's part of the reason why this particular grant was initiated is because we're looking at the numbers, we're looking at outcomes, and we're trying to determine how can we improve these numbers. Our goal is also to manage any type of conflict that comes up because that would prevent our students from succeeding and seeing the outcomes that we would like to observe. Next slide, please. So as a way that I found that helps me to begin to balance this kind of conflict that I experience every day is based on something that I saw in a previous type of equity and inclusion kind of setting that was geared more towards a research lab environment. I was able to think about it based on what I saw in our sessions and really began to look at it as, have I done the following things to help me remain central with these 3 types of hats that I'm constantly wearing? So have I set my expectations on performance and conduct? Have I taught effectively and delegated tasks effectively? Have I given that kudos, the corrective feedback, and the evaluative commentary that my students need in order to succeed? Have I went ahead and recognized the progress and rewarded their achievement? Have I articulated and enforced consequences? Because there are some consequences if certain actions aren't performed. And then have I managed that conflict? Have I done a good job with the explaining and making sure that students are clear about what's happening? But most importantly, have I provided overall support for their success? Next slide, please. So as I sat in these different sessions that we had, I began to think about how can I build some interventions based on what I've seen or make something that I would feel comfortable implementing, because again, there's not one way to do equity. And as the instructor, I have to make sure that I'm comfortable implementing something and not just doing it because someone else said, this is how you're supposed to do it. So some of the things that I kept in mind were, with these interventions that I was developing, are students going to feel valued and feel seen? Are the students allowed to be their true and authentic selves? Are the goals that I have for these various interventions or assignments transparent so that it's clear and coming across? Does everyone feel psychologically safe, including myself, implementing something or bringing up a topic of conversation? And will everyone trust the process in order to learn? Next slide. So as I began to think about things and the interventions that I wanted to incorporate, I realized that the needs that the students have align directly to those three hats that I'm constantly wearing as a mentor, a supervisor, and an educator. And when I began to realize that alignment, I felt that I would be more productive in implementing some of these interventions. Next slide. So what I did was, I've kind of shown you some categories that reflect some of these various interventions that I wanted to do, and I've separated them into different sections that represent being an educator, being a mentor, and being a supervisor. So and you'll see that they really do overlap and intersect, but the strategies that I'll be focusing on today tie more closely into the metacognitive strategies that really tie in towards the supervisor side of things, but they do overlap with mentorship and communication as an educator. Next slide. So as we think about metacognition, especially in STEM fields, it's very important for students to build that confidence so that they know how to think critically and independently on their own and feel comfortable doing it. And many times we take for granted as educators this process of being an independent thinker. And we feel that through all of our training, it just happens naturally. But it's our job as educators to communicate, how do we think independently? And so kind of building and setting the stage to begin this process of metacognition development. Next slide. So some of the interventions that I have incorporated that I found to be quite useful were these things called prerequisite knowledge video assignments. And this really came from speaking and listening to students in the student panel that have come to our sessions and hearing some of the conversations that other peers and faculty on this grant have also shared. And it really came down to the fact that, and I think Professor Walker has said it best, you don't know what you don't know. And so the students don't know what they don't know. And it's up to us to bring our students up to the same level to begin the process of this educational journey. So with these prerequisite knowledge video assignments, what I do is I assign them, it covers information that the students will see in the following week. So I use Play Pause It, and I find videos that I feel are helpful and useful, and I incorporate questions into the video. And then this way the students are able to watch the video and they can say, oh yeah, I can comfortably answer these questions. Or they realize, wait a minute, I didn't think that I thought I knew this, but it wasn't in the depth that I needed to. Let me go back and rewatch this section. And so the way that I have my Canvas shell set up is that once the student completes the prerequisite knowledge video, it unlocks the next module. So that way their brain is now primed for what they're going to see when they enter the lecture space in the following week. I also award the students bonus points for doing these particular prerequisite knowledge video assignments. So there's no penalty if perhaps they get through and they don't achieve a 70%. They will have still seen the content. They can still go back and rewatch and try again, and they still will have access to what's coming up. And it starts that process of them realizing and recognizing, this is the information that I'm comfortable and confident in. but this is the section where I need to spend a little bit more time. So once the students have been brought up to this level, then it's time to begin the active learning sessions. And I do this through either a flipped classroom model on certain lectures or through active review sessions that I had weekly. And I found that this really gave students an opportunity to say, well, I remember in the video, it said this, but I'm not sure how it connects with what we've just talked about. It allows them to kind of have control over their learning and realize that they do have a foundational knowledge. And then something that I plan to add to this process is the student learning outcome assessment. So my thought process is just like we've seen in an English class where they tell you, you want to tell the reader what you're going to tell them, then you tell them, and then you remind them of what you told them. And so the SLO assignments are short 5 questions that are going to cover certain topics that I know that tend to be a challenge for students to master, and they'll be able to go back to their notes and test their knowledge to see, have I created a plan that helps me understand this knowledge? And if not, they get another chance to try again to address these SLO questions, because the goal is to make sure that they've mastered certain concepts, and I want them to feel confident moving forward. So those are just some of the things that I have implemented in previous semesters and that I plan to continue and add into this upcoming semester. So I thank you for your time and attention, and I will pass the baton to Jing. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jing. I'm in Earth Science. I teach geography and GIS. So what is GIS? Geographic Information System. So basically, I use computers, technologies to study the Earth and teach my students how to study the Earth. So today, I'm so happy to be here to share with you 2 things. One is my journey towards this equity-minded practice classroom teaching. And the other one is I want to share with you one of the practices I learned in the past year and I'm going to implement in the fall. So now I'm going to share with you 2 links I'm going to be using in the later in my presentation. So you can just open it on your end. Next slide, please. Okay, so my journey. Well, this fall, our keyword is equity. And we have had so many workshops and seminars today, and you learned many, many things. We loved it, but let's be honest, you're a little bit overwhelmed, right? That is how I feel when I first encounter those concepts, you know, the teaching methods and practices. So, you know, as a STEM nerd or science nerd, when I first encountered this, I need to do some literature review. So I did a little bit of research on my end. What heck is this equity-minded teaching? So this is one thing I found really useful. They cover like 5 aspects of this equity-minded teaching. So curriculum transformation, keyword is to make our curricular relevant to all my students, regardless of their backgrounds. And inclusive environment, the keywords I got is a sense of belonging. And the third one is inclusive pedagogy. Okay, I need to make my coursework or the science assignments relevant and invites collaborations. And I need to provide timely support and so students can learn. And the 4th one is interpersonal awareness. So basically I need to provide this authentic caring to my students and develop this authentic relationship to my students. Feel they're supported by me, by their class in their learning journey. And the last one is interpersonal awareness. So from my personal perspective, you can tell from my accent, I'm originally from China. I'm speaking Chinglish, not English, right? So how my students feel in my class. Am I just using my Chinese perspective to judge, to evaluate their performance. Because I have to admit, I didn't grow up in this equity-minded teaching classroom at all in my learning journey. Because in China, you know, one standard, one central government, right? You have to meet this standard bar up there. If you cannot make it, shame on you. That's the environment I grew up. So I realized that, yeah, how I see my class is not how our students see our class. So I'm like, I'm on board, because as in SMC, community college teacher, I think the most important mission of our job is to get students on this beautiful learning journey to change their lives in a better way, right? So next slide, please. So, well, then I just did some self-reflection. So what I had known at that time last year. So I know we have been talking about equity is not equal to equality, and we see this cartoon, this figure many times, right? I know that. So I need to, as a teacher, I need to provide different stairs to different students, not just hold the one standard. And my job is to support all my students, especially in our community college. We have the most diverse student population compared to many four-year institutions. So yeah, I have students, you know, they're retired already. By the way, I admire their life learning, you know, the mission to back to school, right? And also I have the high school students just right out of San Monica High. So how I accommodate all these learning styles. I'm aware of that, but I didn't know how. So how different students experience my class. How can I cultivate a sense of belonging? You know, you have people retired already. You have people right out from high school. How to cultivate the sense of belonging for all my students, so that they can learn better, and they're so different from me. I didn't know how they passed that their, you know, what's called IP test or something, or high school entrance. I didn't know, because I didn't grow up in that environment. And do I really understand my students' perspective? I remember my students shared with me some pop culture, something. I'm like, what's that? Because I didn't know. And how, because we're so different, how can I, you know, provide this authentic care like I did in my research? Am I allowing my Chinese stereotype assumptions affecting my teaching and my evaluation? So that is, I didn't know how to do that. And this grant came out last year. I'm like, oh, I can learn all these. So I'm on board. And the real click and cracking moment for me is last year when I was in Dubai. You're like, why you were in Dubai? Because last year when the COVID-19 hits, I was in China visiting my family. And you know, we locked down the border and I couldn't come back. I've been teaching online for the entire year, but I desperately to come back to US to teach my students, so I can be closer physically to them. So I have to travel from the other side of the world, stay in Dubai for 16 days, and they can come back to United States. So that is the entire journey. But at that time, I was in this training, the Cora Learning webinar about micro aggregation. And I think it's Dr. Harris. He shared with us an example about this Asian student in his class when people start talking about China virus, Kung Fu virus, and this student totally checked out. She didn't feel belonged to this class, and I bet in the rest of the semester, she just quit, I think. So I think the belonging is really important, and how I provide this, how I cultivate this sense of belonging throughout the semester. So I'm thinking, next slide, please. In all my classes, what kind of practices I can do to provide this, cultivate this sense of belonging. So in our grant, I learned a lot. So first thing is how to, like Andrea just presented, the instructive intervention, check-in, and resources. I learned GPS, flexible office hours, and culturally relevant course content, and so many things. But well, basically what we learned in our workshop is just very general, but I developed the specific practices work for my class. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is basically just quickly what are the courses I'm going to teach in the fall. I teach 2 geography class, well, physical geography class and 2 GIS class. So they're all online with flexible office, flexible meetings. So basically I need to provide this support and all finish all my teaching online. So next slide, please. Okay, so the one thing I want to focus on is this alternative assignments. Why choose this one? Because I think students will spend most of their time experience our online classes by doing things. This is especially true in my class. Speaking of physical geography, they need to go outside to enjoy our nature and learn, appreciate their understanding of our Mother Earth. And GIS specifically, this is the tool, right? You work with computers, you need to learning by doing. So my assessment, my assignment is really important. How I use my assessment and assignments to make students feel, oh, this assignment is just made for me. Professor Jing just made for me. And it's important important to me, and it's exciting. I can use the output of those assignments to make good changes. That is the first one. I want to use those assignments to keep them motivated to learn throughout the semester, because every week they have to do this, right? If they feel bored, they check out. And the second one is keep students engaged with the course contents. Well, we have to finish our teaching method, teaching goals, right? The SLOs. So I want to use assignments to provide this environment opportunity for them to practice, what they have learned by watching my video, by reading the materials online or other things. Okay, and the third one is to achieve my teaching and learning goals. The basically upper level SLO, spatial thinking, field data collection, and spatial analysis mapping tools. And the last one is build and maintain the learning community. So the learning, I always say to my students, learning to Jing is not just, or teaching to Jing is not just a presentation, presenting our PPTs. Teaching and learning actually is a beautiful conversation. And we don't just learn from Jing, you learn also from our learning community. So that is what is authentic care and support. So I want to use those assignments to provide this environment. They can build their learning community to support each other. So this is what I landed in my class specifically for GIS course. I want to use this specific project called Mapping in Equality. So that is basically redlining. In 1930s in US, we have this redlining happening, and basically the home loan I forgot corp something the full name, but they basically manually draw those polygons. This area is dangerous. I won't learn the loans to those homeowners to pay their loans, right? So, and one of the important thing is ratio composition is one of the most standard for them to circle those lines. And back to St. Martin College, we have people with different racial backgrounds, and they from all over Los Angeles. I think this one really can feel them. They study their environment, historically, and nowadays. So basically, I want to develop this semester-long project, starting from field data collection, like the third one I mentioned there. I will give them some survey form. They can go out as a group, collaborative learning, right? And group work to survey their communities, how those red learning decades ago, right, to still affect their learning, their living environment, how they affect the poverty, for example, the environmental conditions, environmental justice, pollution, so many things. I think those topics can in the first place get them excited, want to learn this method. With GIS, they can learn. And the second one is, well, they collect the data, right? And they also need to draw other layers, GIS, spatial data layers. They need to analyze this pattern. So that is another teaching goal. I need to teach my student how to search those data from Census Bureau, from California, GIS portal, and many other online resources. This is another thing, teaching goal. I finished through this. And the third one, data collection, I feel that I touched that already. Oh, the first one is they first need to read this map developed in 1930s. So they practice how to read maps. That's another thing I need to teach in my class. So very relevant to their life. And I will invite people from different institutions and different institutions, different groups to come to our class to elaborate how this matter, why this matter, why you need to care, why you need to study this question. So keep them motivated to learn. They can make the real change in their neighborhood, affect their family, friends, and neighbors. And integrate projects on redlining. We have many examples. I can show them. Next slide, please. So these, after my presentation, I'm going to send those links to you guys, and you can see how beautiful those outcomes can be. And they think, oh, well, by learning GIS, I can also do this. Yes, I'm on board. So you can see through those alternative assignments, all the students, regardless of their backgrounds, they can all find a place in my class in these specific assignments and many other assignments. And each of those assignments keep them motivated, finish my teaching goals, learn something, and they can right away implement what they learned in the class in the real world to solve real world problems, and also make good changes, make their life and neighborhood and their friends, family life better. So basically, I always say to my student, let's map the world. Let's make difference in our environment. So really get my student really excited and keep engaged in our class in this online environment. So this basically is my one of the practices I'm going to implement in the fall. I think it's if you teach some class practices and learning by doing is really important. I think alternative assignment, I would highly recommend you to use this practice. So that is just that's me. That's my presentation, and I'm passed on to Chris.
All right, I'll wait till you get the slides up, Silvana. Let me know when you're ready. Can you hear me okay? Okay. I'll tell you what, I'll just get started and you can work on getting the slides up because the first one's just fine by itself. Hello, I'm Chris Grant and I teach anatomy and physiology here at Santa Monica College. So we got this. Why don't you put it in slideshow mode? There you go. Great. I wanted to make this presentation a little more experiential. So I'm going to start with a mindfulness exercise, knowing it's the last presentation of the day and I'm hoping you guys stay awake. I call this minute meditation, and I do this before quizzes and exams. So I want you to imagine yourself as one of my anatomy students, and please get yourself in a comfortable position. Let go of anything in your hands, get your feet well supported, and you can close your eyes and turn off your video. if you feel more comfortable doing so, I want you to take a deep cleansing breath in through your nose and then let it come out in your mouth at your own pace. Imagine yourself getting smaller and smaller until you are a bunch of oxygen molecules circling in your nose and out your mouth. And now we're going to journey through your body. As you come in through your nose, you will pass through the nasal cavity to the back of your throat, which we learned to be the pharynx. You will continue to float down the pharynx until you have to make a choice, the esophagus or the larynx. But you are quickly whisked into the larynx and travel past the vocal cords and into the trachea with its C-ringed cartilages, and will come down to the next division at the carina, where you will go either right or left. Doesn't matter. Just let your breath take you into either primary bronchus, where you will travel more deeply into the lungs with every breath until you reach the little sacs known as alveoli. Here you will cross a respiratory membrane, jump on a red blood cell, and travel back to the heart where you are whooshed out of the body. Some of the oxygen will head up to your brain to nourish and provide the energy you will need for this exam, while others will go to the muscles of your neck and back to better support you. I want you to feel those muscles and start by isometrically squeezing the muscles of your upper neck and back, following the trapezius out to your deltoids and into your shoulders. Still holding that tension, squeeze your biceps, your triceps, forearms. And I want you to take all the tension, fear, anxiety, and stress you may be feeling and ball it up into your hands. Take a deep breath in and crush all of that negative energy in your fists. As you breathe out, I want you to open your hands, release that energy, and feel the warmth of fresh blood taking its place, traveling up your arms into your brain. Breathe in, breathe out. I want you to know that you are already successful just by being here today. You have already overcome so many obstacles, whether it be dealing with transportation, getting kids to school, restarting the computer, or years and generations of meeting systemic challenges that have put you right here, right now. You are meant to be here. Breathe in, breathe out. Now let's go have a great exam. In this case, I'll start my presentation. I first learned about equity a few years ago at an Escala training, where they taught us that culturally responsive teaching and learning can be envisioned as a three-legged ladder. Each leg needs to be strong or the ladder will not stand. These legs are based on trust, competence, and relatedness. Trust is built when we reinforce to students that we believe they can succeed in our difficult classes, and we set up the class to give them the opportunity to do so. Building competence occurs when we help them to develop the tools they will use to be successful in this and other coursework. And finally, when we create relationships, we consider not only the relationships with our students, but how we help them to develop relationships with each other. I tell them this is one of my primary goals for them, for we all need each other to succeed. And if they can learn to do that here, they can do that anywhere life leads them. We also need to make the material we're teaching personally meaningful and culturally relevant so they can better relate to it. So let's take a look at some of the practices I've incorporated into each leg this year. Next slide. I realized when putting this together that there are a whole host of equity practices I've utilized that could be categorized under one of the three legs. I'm only going to select one or two from each to demonstrate for you. If you have any questions on them or on some of the others, please feel free to ask at the end of the presentation. Our first exercise, Minute for Meditation, was a method I used to establish trust. I use it to let them know that they are welcome here. I want them to know they should be here and they deserve to be here, no matter where they are coming from. I am doing my best to provide a safe place or space for them, with the hope that they will feel more free to be vulnerable, ask questions, and share. It also gives me an opportunity to be vulnerable to them. And I want them to know they are supported. I am helping to create a space where they can let other stressors go, at least temporarily, so they can better be in the moment and recognize their success. These meditations can range from simply sitting still and recognizing their own breathing patterns, to some type of guided imagery as we did today, or simply doing 2 minutes of laughter, which always starts off a little bit forced, but by the end, people get kind of silly. It allows them to unwind and it breaks down barriers. The next leg of the ladder is competence. While many of you are probably familiar with such practices as making calendars, creating lecture objectives, and Kahoot, here I'm going to highlight my 3 questions approach. Next slide. There we go. Basically, instead of having them read the book before lecture, which frankly we know rarely works, as many of us probably struggle to do so as students, I'm trying to flip my classroom by having them watch a pre-recorded video lecture and then come to class with 3 questions or areas that they want clarification on. I call on 3 random students to ask a single question or bring up a topic of discussion, ensuring that each can ask a unique question. This way they get their participation points. Then others can add additional questions, but this will guide how I spend my lecture time, and it accomplishes several things. 1, they have to come to class prepared in order to get their participation points. 2, it breaks the ice in getting them used to asking questions. It reinforces that everyone has questions, is having difficulty understanding the material, and that it's okay to ask questions. And it allows me to know where to focus for these particular students. Each class is so different. I don't want to waste my time lecturing in areas that they are already understanding, and they for sure appreciate that I want their time in class to be meaningful. I found that above all else, time is one of their most precious commodities, and it is something that we must use wisely. And finally, it helps them to recognize that their input is valued. They are an integral part of the class, and they have control of their own learning. The last leg of the ladder is relatedness. And I've done a few fun things here to help build our community. One is a discussion thread I create each week called Students Helping Students. Go ahead and move to the next slide. Each week by Thursday night, students will enter a question, either a test type question or something that they're truly struggling with. And by Sunday, they have to answer someone else's question. So there's 2 sides to this assignment. On Monday, I'm all excited to get up. It's like my birthday or something, and I respond to their questions, providing clarity when needed and support or praise where I can. So my goal this year was to figure out how I'm going to strengthen the ladder. Well, upon looking back at my NSF Grant experience, I thought I'd share a couple of my aha moments that helped to shift my equity lens. I started to ask myself, why am I so rigid? I would hear other instructors talk about being flexible with due dates on assignments, some allowing students to turn in homework anytime until the end of the semester without penalty. While it may work for them, it just didn't sit right with me. In science and in general life circumstances, there are hard deadlines and natural consequences for not meeting them. And I didn't want to reinforce that you can always just get a pass. To me, much of college is learning about how to set priorities, organizing yourself to meet your goals, and being accountable. And on the other hand, I have to balance that with my main objective being to facilitate learning, while recognizing that so many students are facing obstacles I may never truly or fully comprehend. So I needed a balance. And as you can see here by this graph of my weekly quizzes, my students in particular were struggling. I used to give them 2 chances to complete weekly homework assignments. So naturally they go through it once and fix their errors, then get 100% the second time. But they were bombing the quizzes. They weren't learning. So I changed my focus. I made the homework have unlimited attempts, and this allowed them to practice, which is really what I wanted them to do. I could set softer deadlines on certain assignments while keeping the hard ones for others, as in life. And as you can see, when I implemented this in the middle of the semester, their scores began to rise, building their confidence. And when I continued this the next semester, their scores started off high and remained so. This led to greater retention and higher overall grades. Another aha moment came after sitting in several workshops. And I realized that when I was paying attention the most and got the most value out of a session was when it was led by a student panel. Here are 3 of my takeaways. 1, students want to be valued. One student shared how she got a job working as a research lab as an undergrad, washing out Petri dishes. One day, the lead investigator, not a grad or a postdoc student, but the primary researcher, asked her for her opinion on something. During the panel discussion, she couldn't recall what the question actually was, but she will forever remember that feeling she had. The Petri dish scrubber, she had an opinion that mattered to somebody very important. That became a springboard for her to begin having conversations with the instructor, which eventually led to promotions and a letter of recommendation to get into grad school. She said, the thing is, while it's great to have places like the Student Equity Center or campus organizations like Adelante or Black Collegians to welcome and advocate for minority and marginalized students, we need to create that feeling of being valued throughout our campus, in every classroom, in every interaction, no matter how small. It can make a world of difference for growth. So I continue to look for those Petri dish moments in my class to see what growth I can foster. Another student mentioned GPS, to think about how we are using it and what we are using it for. She recalled getting an alert stating that she was missing a or multiple assignments, and she needed to talk to the academic counselor or email the professor to see how she could improve. Well, she then went on to say that 95% of the time, she already knew she was late, and it just felt like this message was pounding into her head that she was a failure, reinforcing that she wasn't keeping up, and it didn't help. But then she said, what a difference it was when she got a message that simply stated, I'm getting concerned about you and just wanted to check in. It was more about valuing her as a person and seeking to understand the problem rather than simply recognizing she had a problem. This opened up the door for her to honestly share with the instructor her particular situation and for them to make a realistic plan to get back on track. So one of the takeaways here was that we have all these great technological tools such as GPS, but we need to be really careful how we use them, choosing the language we use wisely, and to stay student-centered, ensuring that they are being valued at every step along the way. This builds into the third point. Get to know me, not just my grades. Relationship is key. And I've started this past few semesters by introducing students to Flipgrid before the term even starts. Here, students make a 30-second video to introduce themselves to the class and have a platform to reach out and make connections. You can see here that we're beginning to support each other even before the semester started. Some will also refer back to it later in the term when they're creating new study groups. This semester, I'm having them include their favorite artist or song, and I'll pick one to play as a lead-in to the class. This lets them know that I not only hear them, but I value that in our diversity in our class. So this gets back to my main point of how am I going to strengthen the ladder? Who better to ask than the students? With more surveys, we've come up with 3 things I'm going to do differently this fall semester. First off, I figured if student panels were good for me, maybe they would work good for students. When I asked in a year-end survey, this came back as one of their top requests. So I've invited a diverse group of 4 of my previous anatomy students to come back as a student panel on the second day of class this semester to share their experiences, the highs and lows, challenges and triumphs, and to address student questions and concerns directly so they can hear it from the horse's mouth. Not that any of them are horses, but they get that bond. Second, I'm going to schedule private office hours. You can do this by coordinating the Canvas calendar with your section. I'm going to require every student to meet with me once in the first 3 weeks for just 10 minutes. And we'll then keep an hour open every week for private appointments in addition to the regular class office hours. If I can get students to feel comfortable talking to me about anything, not even class related, it may help to open future doors so that they may feel more comfortable asking the difficult class related questions later. And third, I'll continue to develop more group activities, as they can listen to me all they want, but I consistently hear from year-end semester surveys that they found they learned the most when they worked with each other, when they taught each other in class. So I do this by using group worksheets. One student will upload a document to their Google Drive and share it with everyone else in their breakout room. I create groups in Canvas so they can submit a single link to an assignment. They can work on it together during and after class, as it is a living document. and I use it to help them organize the material, and I can see who is working on it during class and how they continue to use it afterwards. So here's how I'll tell if all this has worked. I'm developing a survey for the first day, 8th week, and end of term, addressing issues of trust, connectedness, and their confidence levels, and being able to take on challenging material. Then we'll create a course equity analysis, where we evaluate the enrollment and success of our marginalized students based on retention and grades, determining not only if our students in these groups are passing, but if the grades they receive are equitable. And from here, we'll continue to evaluate and revise the pedagogy. So that's my ladder in progress. I guess it's time I can open up the discussions for any questions for any of the three of us. And I appreciate you attending and hanging in there with us. It's been a long day. So I'm not looking at the chat, but are people able to unmute themselves?
Yes, go ahead and unmute yourself or raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question or just have comments or concerns. I see some of our cohort 2 is here already too, so that's exciting.
I have a question for anyone really, any of the three presenters. I'm Hari Vishwanatha in the English department. Thank you for all three presentations. I just wanted to know how you would define equity.
Sure. In my mind, how I define equity, it's really looking at, we're all coming from a different place, and based on the current construct of the environment that we're in, I look and I see which group or population has more of a challenge exercising their strengths within that construct. And for me, equity, I build that around the group that has strengths, but their strengths have, the system has not been set up to highlight those strengths. So that's where I look at how I view equity as taking that particular group, reaching out, being inclusive, and building a space for them to exercise their strengths. And through that process, that will ripple through to other individuals within that group. And eventually everyone does benefit from those implementations. But I'm really focused in on the group that typically does not have that opportunity to shine and exercise and typically contribute in that space.
I think it's really important to differentiate equity from equality, and that we're not trying to make things equal for everybody, but really what we're trying to do is make an equal opportunity for everybody to succeed. And I think that's what Andria was saying, is really make the class individualized to our students as much as possible. If we're getting to know them, getting to know their relationships, we'll be able to pull out their best processes for learning. And that's going to be different for every class and for every person. And as teachers, we have to see that through many different lenses. So hi,
Thank you.
I see your hands up.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. That was such a nice presentation. And, I'm learning so much about the different strategies that you guys are using. I think one of the issues I encounter is that, I try to provide support to the students, right? But, just the number of students that I have in my class, it sort of limits my ability to reach out to a lot of time the students who really need the most support from me. And so what ends up happening is that I'm sitting there waiting for students to reach out to me because because I don't have time to kind of go and seek them out. I tried, in a couple of semesters to actually do that, sort of proactively reaching out to students who, sort of I could see need the most help and try to build relations with them. But in the end, it was a lot of effort expanded, and I would say not so much gain at the back end of it, because they were appreciative, but then they also said, well, it's just too difficult this semester. I'm gonna, take it again the next semester or something. So, and they end up dropping. So I guess I'm wondering if you guys encounter those situations and how you sort of figure out a way to reach out those students who are actually needing the help, but then they're too shy or embarrassed or scared to reach out to you.
I can field that question. I'm trying to figure out the same thing, Sahat, and it is a lot of work. And what I've tried to do is set aside a little bit of time, usually on a Sunday is a good day for me to just kind of set aside an hour that's just focused on being proactive and reaching out to students. As it really does make a big difference being proactive rather than waiting for the students to be the ones to reach out to you, because many students are not going to reach out for a variety of reasons. And it might be prioritizing, right? To look to see how many absences does this particular student have, and maybe have a cutoff point. That's something that I've used before for myself, where I say X number of absences, that's an automatic me reaching out. And that's the way that I've been managing it. But I don't have a quick fix, right? Because the other thing too is that you want to be authentic, right? You don't want it to be just a simple copy and paste to all students, where it's just like their student, right? You want to make it personal. You want to include their name, and maybe to include something that's the student has shared with you in introductions. But yeah, it's a lot of work. I don't know what the workaround is, and it is time consuming, but I think for me it's the payoff is in the results, the impact.
I can share something. I totally feel for you, Sihat, how many times you're sitting there office hours and no one come, and they need your help indeed. But thinking from their perspective, many students think about when we were students, it's like daunting for us to reach out to professors, because they're there to judging us. So one thing is I really like one slide in Chris' presentation, know me instead of just my grades. So I think we need to use a lot of methods to reach out to students. Two things I found very useful in my class is, one is Pronto. So earlier we have these Pronto workshops, and it's just like text message, and I get very, they can let me know their questions whenever they have. It's just like testing. It's not just writing, open up your email box and then you write this long message to your professor. So just forget about it. Another thing is, when I provide my feedback, I actually now prefer to record a very short video to let them see my face, because many students say, my professor just like a ghost. I never see his or her faces, just the words. So I actually prefer, if I can, I always record my feedbacks to their assignments, and they can know I really care, because I can, in addition to using words, I can use my facial expression, I can use my voice to show I really care your success. And please let me know whenever you need help, please, I'm not that scary. So yeah, that's another thing I found really helpful. So actually at the end of this summer, one of my students, really shy, a very shy guy in my class, he wrote this message to me, Professor Jing, I now feel whenever I need help, I can reach out to you. I'm like, yes, that's exactly the point.
So I was just thinking of something too online, and I haven't done this yet, but I just thought of it. I don't know if you are teaching synchronously or not, and do breakout groups with students. And I was thinking, well, that's a nice place to get to know students, at least in little rooms. But my trouble has always been, there's still some things that you need to get somebody privately. And my thought was, you can actually make an additional breakout room and pull a student into that one, so that you have a private chat with them during class when you've got their attention. And then you can capture them, at least to have a quick conversation saying, hey, I want to check in with you later if that's okay. And that's something I know that I've struggled with the last 2 semesters, but maybe I'll try that this time.
Right. And yeah, thank you so much for the ideas. And I think, many of the things you mentioned I had tried in the past. It's mainly sort of the question of time, and the fact that there are students who come to my office hours, so I'm not sort of lacking those students. However, there are students who I really want to reach out to who are not coming to those support services that I'm providing. And because of time, I don't really have the time to kind of reach out to those other students. And due to various factors, they're not coming or using the resources I'm providing for them. And so I'm trying to figure out, ways to, authentically reach out to them, right? I mean, technology is obviously one of the things that I tried before, but sometimes it's just, they're not responding to that either, so you sort of need that one-on-one connection, but that takes a lot of time, right, for each student to do that. And that's the part that I find difficult. So I was just wondering if there are other tools to do that. But I think, Kieran, you said it best. It's really just time. You just need to put extra time in there. Thank you.
I see Janan has a question.
Yes, so actually this is kind of some hints and tips maybe for Sahat. And then I want to get your guys' feedback on what do you think of these tools. So what I do is I do what's called a meet and greet session within the first week of class. I email the students a week before the first day of class, and I give them a link to a Zoom session, and I tell them this is a way for us to meet and for them to see each other. Obviously, not everyone turns their camera on, but what I do is I take roll as if we're sitting in a class. So I call their name, and I tell them when I call your name, it's up to you to turn your camera on or not. If you don't feel comfortable turning your camera, you don't have to, but at least unmute yourself and say hi. So each student gets about 30 seconds to a minute to be in the spotlight. And some of them, well, the majority actually do turn their cameras on, and they, wave or, say something about the class, whatever. So that kind of does like an icebreaker. The other thing I do is I use GPS like crazy. When GPS was first introduced, I was very skeptical. I was like, oh God, this is another tool we have to use. It's not gonna work, nothing's gonna happen. But it worked like magic. And what I do is, depending on the length of your course, very early on, maybe not after the first week, but after the second week, if you notice a student is missing assignments, don't wait for GPS to tell you it's time to do a review, but you just go into GPS, because now there's a link in GPS in Canvas. You go into GPS and you message all the students who are not doing well or are missing assignments from the first 2 weeks. What happens is the student gets an email from you, and there's a message from you, and the counselors will contact the students for you. So this addresses the issue of time. I can't contact every single student. They keep contacting them, and they call them until kind of like either, in the majority of cases, they reach them. In very, very rare cases, they don't. They're not able to, initiate contact with the student, and they do tell you that you do get notified that the student was pretty much not responsive. And then in that case, I contact this, I try to find a way to contact the student. And this is where my question comes in. Is it okay for us from an equitable point of view to call the student and say, hey, I've been trying to reach you, I emailed you, the counselors have emailed you, and I haven't heard from you. Is it okay, for example, to leave them a message? And the same thing for the meet and greet Zoom. I think to me it sounds okay, because I give the students the choice whether they want to turn their cameras on or off. But I think the one that might have an issue is me kind of, if you want to call it, harassing the student, like, where are you? I've made several attempts to reach you, but I was unsuccessful. And thank you so much. This has been really, really great.
So I can speak to my approach with this. I love what you're doing. It's really great. it's different. And it's also intrusive, and we want more of that. And with respect to GPS, one of the things that I do is have an extra credit assignment at the beginning of the semester, so the students know that I'm going to be using GPS. It's a tool. It's not going to come out of left field for my students. I talk about it in my class. And I also include it as part of my classroom pact. So my classroom pact is basically just a dynamic document that I update, my students can update, and it's basically what students can expect from me and what I expect from my students. And so it's kind of our working agreement, but part of that is that the expectation is that I will reach out to my students and I won't wait for them. So if I sense that a student is having a difficult time, I'll be the person to reach out to them. So that's also another place where I flag GPS. And then I always send my first message over email or Canvas rather than using GPS, just to do a kind of very warm message to the student and say that I may be using this tool. So I'll put it somewhere in that message that GPS is a tool that we're using, and I might be reaching out for additional support. And then after that, then I'll probably send my message over GPS. And so it's not strange, it's not unexpected. And I do the warm handoff there as well. So I know that the students are seeing the message, so I want to make sure that they feel validated, that it's supportive, and that there's a warm handoff that's happening. And then in terms of leaving a message, the counselors will actually get in contact with the student, and they will attempt to call them. And if they can't reach the student and they get their voicemail, they'll leave a message for the student by voicemail. So at a certain point, that's almost as much as you can do. You can keep reaching out to the student. You can keep supporting them as you go forward. So that's kind of been my approach.
I wanted to just thank everybody, and also I see your hand up, Fruzen, so I'll stop recording and let the conversation keep going, but I want to respect everybody's time. So if you need to go ahead. Thank you so much for coming. I'm always in awe of our wonderful NSF participants and our PI for their wonderful work. And yes, thank you so much for tuning in. But Fruzen, if you want to keep here and ask your question, go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to also make a comment. There is